Do you ever wonder how the ultra wealthy think about money? Because I'm telling you, they're operating on a whole different plane than the rest of the world. And their belief about the world and their beliefs about money are attracting more and more financial success to them. But this one belief, this one mindset that you could actually start to adapt today could change everything for you. So let's jump in. Welcome to Success Sundays with Harrison. I'm your host, Harrison Wilder. I'm a corporate strategist and entrepreneur with an executive MBA from the George Washington University. I've managed two multi-million-dollar companies, and I advise top-level executives from a variety of industries. In this show, you'll find practical insights that will help you succeed as a leader in today's business environment. If you're serious about developing your skills as an executive, this is the place for you. Enjoy today's episode. I couldn't watch the movie, the Titanic, growing up because, it was just, there are a few reasons. It came out when I was in high school, and for a teenage boy, there's a couple of reasons why the movie could be uncomfortable. But, for me, it was just depressing, because I identified so much with Jack. Like, Jack is there, he's walking around on the lower decks of the Titanic, and I could just imagine him looking up, into the higher deck levels, and maybe every once in a while a door opens up and he captures, a reflection off of a giant chandelier, or maybe he sees, well-dressed people walking by the windows, and he's thinking to himself, like, man, I wonder what's going on in those rooms, right? Like where the influencers of their society were hanging out, where the movers and the shakers and the people who are commanding so much wealth and income would be. And, there's Jack on the lower levels, and I just, felt like, man, I relate so much to this, and maybe you felt that way too. Like, you're wondering, like, yeah, what is going on inside of those rooms? Like, what are those people talking about, and what are they thinking about? And but when you try to ascend up to those levels, like you make your way over to the stairs that are supposed to lead up to the upper decks, and all you see is like a sign that says no admittance, right? And it's just a reminder that you are not welcome, right? That maybe that you don't belong inside of those circles with those people. And so, and the movie was just generally depressing. Jack, eventually made his way up into those circles for a minute with Rose, but even when he's there, like, everybody's making him feel like he doesn't really belong, right? And ultimately, it's like the only solution is that, like, Rose has got to leave the upper echelon of society if she wants to be with Jack. Are those really the only options? Is this the only way that this can work? And then finally, Jack just dies. It's the most depressing movie ever. But it does make you think about, like, what it's like, to be in those rooms. But one of the things I've learned is that, you could know all of the secrets. You could know all of, like, the insider information and all the kind of tactics and things that the wealthy are using to create and preserve wealth. But if you don't learn to think the way that wealthy people think, then you're not going to have the results that wealthy people have. And this is actually something that's hard for many of us because we've actually been taught most of our lives to despise the wealthy. You've been raised to be like, oh, if somebody's ultra wealthy, they must have done something wrong, right? They must have somehow they got that by taking advantage of somebody, or they shouldn't have it, or they did something they weren't supposed to, or they're doing something illegal, or they're not doing their share. These are the belief systems that have been ingrained in most of us who grew up in the poor or middle class, to the way we're supposed to think about wealthy people. And I don't know 100% why that is. I think it has something to do with the fact that that's kind of what we have to tell ourselves if we're going to stay poor and middle class in order not to feel bad, right? We have to be like, oh no, I'm actually a better person because of my financial situation, right? So, but regardless of why, we've been taught to despise the wealthy. And it's even like it's in Hollywood, it's in the movies, it's in every TV story you see. Like the evil person is the entrepreneur, the evil person is the wealthy person. That's the guy who's like trying to ruin everybody's life, right? But here's the problem with it, is that you will never let yourself become what you despise. So if you are living your life despising wealthy people, then you're actually going to self-sabotage yourself, right? You're never going to allow yourself to become wealthy because you want let yourself, your subconscious will not allow yourself to become what you despise. So my wife and I, we've had to be real intentional about this, that even when we don't agree with everything that a ultra wealthy person says or does, that we can still respect and admire them for having generated wealth for their families, because that's something we aspire to, right? We have aspired to generate great wealth for our family, so we can't run around despising people who have pulled that off, right? People who have done that, we need to figure out how to admire them and allow ourselves to respect them, even if we don't agree with everything that they do, right? And so that's okay. So it's important to understand most of all, the belief systems of the ultra wealthy, and then to adapt the ones that are going to serve you well, right? So could we allow ourselves to begin to admire people who have attracted great wealth to themselves enough that we can learn from them, right? Enough that we can adapt the belief systems that have served them well and could potentially serve you well. But here's the one that I found that really sets wealthy people apart from the poor and the middle class, and I want to share it with you. But before I do that, let me tell you a little story. Maybe you've heard about the story about the old man, very poor, impoverished old man who had lived his whole life in this tiny apartment. And, he had lived his whole life very much aware of his poverty, right? Very much believing that look, this is, my situation is not good. In fact, this man, even though he had always had a desire to be married, he'd always had a desire to start a family, and to enjoy life more, like many people do. Even though he had these desires inside of him, he never dated anybody, never got married, never had children, largely because he just didn't want to bring anybody else into this situation that he had, this financial situation. And so he lived his whole life just kind of barely getting by. He had a low income job that was barely able to provide for him to live and to provide for his small little apartment that he had. When the man finally died and passed away, and the state came and began sifting through his belongings, the only thing that he had, he had his little furniture in his apartment or whatever, and his little knickknacks. But they found that he actually had this painting that had been passed down to him from his family, something that he had never really, cared about or thought was worth anything. But it turns out that this painting that he had inherited from his family was a priceless painting worth millions and millions of dollars. And here was this guy living in poverty, completely unaware that he actually, the whole time, his entire life, had everything he needed in order to pursue the dreams that he had on his heart, but he just didn't know that he had it, right? The point of this story is to illustrate that, listen, this is the mindset that wealthy people have. Wealthy people understand that everything they need or desire is already available to them, right? But poor people, the poor and the middle class oftentimes don't even understand the value of what they already have. This man had been living his whole life with everything he needed right in front of him, but he didn't even understand the value of what he had. Now, this is why Jesus was able to say that he who has a lot, he says this in the Gospels, to him who has a lot, more will be given to him, but to him who has a little, even what he has will be taken away. Now, this does not sound very nice. I thought Jesus was supposed to be a nice person. I thought he was supposed to have nice things to say, encouraging things to say. And this does not sound very nice until you understand what he's actually saying here, because he's not talking about what you actually have. Jesus is talking about what people think that he has, right? So you can rephrase this to say, when you think you don't have enough, right? That he who thinks that he has a little, even what he has, he's not going to recognize the value of it. It's going to be taken away from him. But he who thinks that he has a lot will be given more, right? Because if you think about this, who is it really a judgment on if we believe that we have been put in this world with not enough to fulfill our dreams and desires, right? Who is that a reflection on? Who are we ultimately judging if we have a belief system that we don't have everything that we need? Well, it's a judgment on God. It's not even a judgment on people. It's not a judgment on society. It's a judgment on God, who put dreams inside of your heart, who put desires inside of your heart, who gave you a vision, who gave you a purpose, but then didn't provide everything that was needed for that vision. Right? It's a judgment call on God. But one of my favorite scriptures is in Ephesians chapter 1, and it actually addresses this issue because it says that before the foundations of the world, right? Say that out loud. Say before the foundations of the world, God knew you. He knew you. He knew who you were, and he called you for a purpose. Before the foundations of the world, God knew you, and God called you to do what it is that he has called you to do in the earth. Now, in order to understand the scripture, we got to go all the way back before the foundations of the earth. Like, we got to go back through all the New Testament, all the Old Testament, all the way back to the book of Genesis, and look at the foundations of the earth. Yes, we're talking about before God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Before God separated the land from the ocean, before God created animals, before God created the fish, before God created the birds, before God created you, before the foundations of the earth, the Bible says that God already knew you. God, not only did he know you, but he called you for a purpose. God already knew his plan for your life before the foundations of the earth. Now, why is this important? Well, because it means that when God was designing every little piece of this planet that we live on, when he was putting it all together, when he was planning it all out and all the seasons and all the things that were going to happen, he had your purpose and he had you in the back of his mind. He was planning things for you. Right? So if God is a good God, doesn't it stand to reason that when he was putting all that stuff together, that he made sure that everything was in place that you needed in order to fulfill your purpose? This is tremendously inspiring. This is tremendously empowering to think that God orchestrated everything that we need in advance, already knowing what it was that he'd called you to do. And so I like to think about it like this, like, wow. So before the foundations of the earth, when God was creating the earth, he's like, you know what? I'm going to bury an oil reserve, deep down in the earth, right in this location so that it could be discovered in the year 2024 when I'm recording this video, so that it could provide jobs for people living during that time period, right? So that it could provide great wealth for somebody who was going to discover it. God, could you imagine that God could do that, right? God can provide. He puts everything in place in order to provide for you. So if God is a good God, then everything you need to fulfill your purpose, everything you need to accomplish every desire that he's given you is already here in the earth. And that's all you got to do is go out and find it, right? I mean, if there's any belief that is serving the ultra wealthy, it's only because it's a belief that cooperates with the way that God has already set things up. And this belief, right, this belief that everything you need is already available to you, I mean, this could change your life because it cooperates with God. It understands Ephesians chapter 1. It understands that before the foundations of the earth, God already knew you. He already loved you. He already called you to a purpose. And he placed everything that you need here in the earth in order to accomplish what he's put in your heart to do. All you need to do is to go out and find it. Well, look, I don't like to end any of these episodes without giving you the success challenge of the week, something very practical that you can do in order to really take advantage of and let sink in what it is that you discovered today. So here's a success challenge of the week for this week. Just take a Post-it note, right, and a pen, and write on the Post-it note a dollar amount or whatever currency you're in that you're listening from. Write a dollar amount that represents a very large sum to you, right? Like an amount that will cover all of your needs and will enable you to move forward with your purpose. Okay, so whatever that number it is, write it down on a Post-it note, and then underneath it, write this. Write, everything I need has already been provided. Right? Write that down. Fold up the Post-it note. Stick it inside your wallet. I do this. I've got my amount sitting inside of my wallet, so that every time you reach for your wallet, right, I want you to say it out loud. Every time you reach for your wallet, I want you to think about that dollar amount. I want you to say it out loud. Everything I need has already been provided for me, right? And then every time you reach for your wallet, when you say that out loud, it's going to become a part of the way that you think about the world, the way that you see the world around you. All right. Well, listen, if you have any questions for me that I might be able to help you with, anything you're thinking about, maybe I could help with in a future post, put them down in the comments. We love to hear from you. The team loves to hear from you, and we love to create content that is super helpful and relevant for you. So put those down in the comments. My team will tee those up to me for future episodes. But until then, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You know, great businesses and great leaders are built using effective communication. For more, go to speakingschool.com, grab my Elite Business Success Toolkit for free just for trying out our Speaking School membership. That's speakingschool.com. See you next time.